Welcome to another episode of the Launch Notes podcast. I'm Blake from Launch Notes. Really excited to be joined today by Ciara Peter. Ciara's VP of product at Robin. She's led product teams at a bunch of well-known companies like Box, Betterworks, Salesforce, just to name a few. Really excited to dive in today. Ciara, welcome to the Launch Notes podcast. Really excited for the chat today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's do a little background on just how you got involved doing product work in the first place. I'd love to kind of hear how you got into this path and what sort of inspired you to work on product teams.
Oh, Blake, you had no idea what you were getting in.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Right. Well, first, my background, I will tell you that I never in a million years thought that I would be a VP at a tech company when I was growing up. My background starts when I finished college, my first job, bartender and beach bum. So I lived in San Diego. I bartended a couple of these great places and I wanted to promote my bar events. So what I did is I went and I bought an HTML for Dummies book. I bought a bootleg Photoshop CD on eBay.
Nice.
And some Dreamweaver, which was like the website building application of yesteryear. Don't worry, Adobe. I have paid a lot of money to Adobe since then. But
who among us doesn't have a couple Adobe pirate experiences in our background? Right. I don't think any of us would be here if that wasn't the case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, that's not probably. That probably back in the day, if anyone had known about product-led growth back then, that's exactly what it is. Give the people when they don't have any money, just let them get a free copy. And then later they'll just end up paying you thousands and thousands of dollars. So we can say that we helped Adobe and other companies like that pioneer PLG.
I'm going to start using that. That's a great one.
But anyway, so I started building websites, building graphics, it's kind of now there's influencers and people who do all these amazing produced videos for TikTok. I'll call myself more of a MySpace designer.
Nice. Yeah.
And for the youngsters, MySpace was pre-Facebook. That's where you go to hang out with your friends online. Mm-hmm. All of this is really embarrassing, but I love telling this story because I was really just kind of not prepared for any of it.
Another
so
nice introduction to HTML too with MySpace. I think that a lot of us first saw our first div tags inside of a MySpace editor.
Exactly. Who are you if you don't have any glitter on your MySpace, you're kind of nobody.
Yep.
Or a Fall Out Boy graph or something.
Yeah, I think auto playing music happened. That was a big thing with websites back then. You'd open a web page and a song would be playing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was awesome. It was inspirational, but I actually really liked doing this design basically. And I decided to apply to art school, to a grad school program. I got in and I moved home to San Francisco and I went to art school. So in art school, I studied advertising and also digital media. And I was working and still bartending, as Tupac says, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents.
Yes.
And I would just help with any project. And one of the projects, I helped a friend of mine who did a lot of philanthropy, and I helped him build a website and do one of his promotional campaigns for a fundraiser. And that led to him asking me when I was finishing school if I wanted to do a contract design job at a company called Salesforce. And I was interviewing at ad agencies, trying to get a job as a junior copywriter, making $6 an hour. And actually couldn't get hired at any ad agency. It was so competitive. Everybody wanted that job. So I was I'll come work with you guys at Salesforce.
So what was this? Help sort of set the scene. What kind of era of Salesforce was this? What was going on at the time?
Yeah. So post IPO, this is 2008. And so I joined when it was 1,500 employees. Things like the app exchange and the platform had just launched. So it was still sales. CRM was the core product. not a lot of acquisitions happening. It was just really like kind of a one product company that was doing very well, but starting to expand into a platform.
Got it. Got it. Very
So my
cool.
first project. So actually the team I worked on was hired to, or was, our responsibility was like basically take project concepts we were working on and make them into these, I'll say this, what's a more positive word for ridiculous? Like we just make these ridiculous demos. So,
Okay.
so my first, let's call it whimsical. So my first project was Mark Benioff was friends with Neil Young, and Neil had a
Of course, by the
Lincoln
way. Yeah.
car that he decided to make fully electric. So he took his Lincoln from like the 60s or 70s, made it fully electric, and he called it the Link Volt. But
Nice.
just having the Link Volt wasn't good enough. They had to track its performance on the Force.com platform.
Mm-hmm.
So my first job there was building an app that would show the stats of the electric car as it was driving around. So this was like consumption and all this stuff. We built a website called Linkvolt where oh my gosh, there's that show Pimp Your Ride. We did a play on that. It was like Link
Yes.
Your Ride or something where people could
Yeah. Yeah.
upload their, people could upload with photo of their like classic car turned electric, and then they'd be in this photo gallery. And yeah, we launched that and showed it at Dreamforce with 10,000 people, and he
That's
drove the car
awesome.
on stage.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the car only made it a couple more months, but
Yeah.
that was my first job in tech. It was just
That's
like we
awesome.
just have these kind of really fun.
What is it with driving cars on the stage at Dreamforce? I feel like I've heard like 3 versions of that, right? I think they did the Back to the Future car at some point.
Yeah, a friend of mine definitely drove a tractor onto the stage one year.
There we go.
It's
Yep.
all about
Yep.
the show.
It is.
What do they
It's
say? Like that's showbiz. That's showbiz, baby.
yeah, no, like God, Salesforce is that must have been an exciting time to work there because they are so good at that stuff. And I think a lot of people, like, Salesforce has been around so long now, a lot of people don't really recognize as much how innovative they were, especially like coming up with all the marketing and PR and the stunts that Mark would do, and all of that stuff is like a really great kind of case study and just like brute forcing your way into like the public consciousness like over and over again. It's just like a marketing and branding masterclass, I feel like, to go back and look at those, those early Salesforce campaigns and stuff they did.
1000%. And here's what I will say. It also is that crash course in prototyping things and seeing what sticks and seeing what people like.
Mhm.
Like a little bit more serious project, they were launching the Service Cloud. What our team was tasked to do, and Twitter had just launched, and our demo was to build integrations with Facebook and Twitter. So like you could look at a person that
Mhm.
doing customer service activity with, and you could see what they had recently done on social media, which in 2008 was a big deal,
Oh,
or 2009.
yeah.
That was a big
Yeah.
deal. And what actually happened was, you know, people got so excited about it. So the product team took that feedback and actually went and built it. So like we were kind of the
Mhm.
MVP team. I like
Mhm.
sometimes I'm like, oh, we're the demo team. We just built, smoke and mirror. But
Yeah.
we really were like the prototyping team, the MVP team. And that team is hundreds or thousands of people today. And it's become really successful. And what ended up happening is like, I ended up actually working on some really strategic accounts and also that's what you do with a platform, because these things were all technically possible with the platform, but you had to build them. So
Yeah.
I ended
Yeah.
up getting brought into, like really strategic deals where they'd have a customer that is like, this is our goal. We got to imagine it. And I design an app and build it for them and just show them the possibilities. And it really did help
Yeah.
out with sales.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. I believe that, and that other companies I've noticed where, one of the previous startups I worked at was like a very like very horizontal, like kind of no code workflow builder product. And 100% the best way to demo that product with a customer was actually like, hey, like call number one, like you kind of tell us what you're envisioning accomplishing. And then actually we're going to come back a week later or whatever, and we'll build that out for you in the meantime. And then we'll actually demo you your workflow and your application in this. And then it becomes this like show, don't tell moment instead of like, yeah, the product can do this, it can do that, it can do kind of whatever. You're sort of showing them like, okay, like you told us you want to accomplish this. We actually built that, and it does some other cool things that maybe you didn't expect. It's just like a lights out way to demo a product if, that's the situation you're in.
Well, a lot of people are visual thinkers, and I think visual thinking doesn't just mean you have to see it to believe it. It means you have to see it to understand it. Now, like I'm in a position where I evaluate products, and if I can't see my own data in the product, it's really hard. So that's why,
Mm,
like, you know, one point of demos is to actually test out the functionality or trials or free experiences. One point is to test it out, but I think there's probably a significant part of the population that can't really understand it till they see their stuff
t-
there.
totally. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Okay. Cool. 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 So you're doing all this demo work at Salesforce. You kind of Did you continue doing that in your tenure there? Did you kind of I think you kind of grew into a couple different departments and things there too?
Yeah. So I had a great like manager slash mentor that I kind of followed around the company. And so he left that
Nice.
team after a couple of years. So the company went from 1,500 people to 15,000 people in the time that I was there. And I just like took every opportunity I could to work on different stuff. So
Mm,
one interesting thing here is like I've actually been a product is my main focus, but I've had several like design leadership specific jobs. And I've
for sure.
never in my career actually reported to a designer or a design director. I've always reported to the business people. And
Mm,
so I think like my kind of strategy was work in a place where my skill set is really valued and I'm a little bit different than everybody and learn from
mm,
people who have different skills than I do because I didn't go that MBA path. I went to art school
yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's how I learned. So yeah, then I started working on
Hmm.
I had opportunity to work on like the first mobile app that they launched. I had an opportunity to help integrate a company that was acquired, and I just did more producty stuff. But
Yeah.
product at Salesforce was very technical at the time, and so I
Hmm.
wanted to do more product, but I didn't really think that was the way to go. So I went and worked for a startup. Really like my resume looked pretty design forward. Who's going to hire me? Yeah, and especially I was like a senior director when I left there, and was
Hmm.
gonna hire me as a senior director of product with no product experience. So I had to figure out my own, like, what bet I was willing to
Yeah.
take. So I went to a Series A startup and just kind of bet on myself. And my thing there was like, I didn't even really have a job title when I started. My whole thing was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna just start doing the product job
Nice.
and
Yeah.
we're just gonna see what happens. And
Hmm.
hopefully I can stick with that job. And so we got our Series A the first week and I started hiring PMs and the rest was history. But like,
Nice.
really learning product for me was, all right, we got a bunch of problems to solve and I have to
Hmm.
figure out how to solve them.
Yeah.
There are frameworks and I think it's helpful for people to learn product framework, especially especially when you're working at a company at scale and you need some way to translate things across the company. But for me, it was me and the two engineering co-founders, let's go set up Jira to
Yeah.
talk to some people that have this problem that you think need to be solved. Let's validate it. Let's
Hmm.
design and build some prototypes and hired PMs. And it was
Yeah.
great. So
Yeah.
worked there for 4 years. Took a little break. It was pretty tiring.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
tired. Took a break and then and then I just got an opportunity to work my next job was at Fox and managed a $500 million portfolio. That was like awesome experience. And then I went to Gainsight, Medallia, and kind of took that whole time to figure out what I really like working on, which is kind of mid-stage startups.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So what do you think were the main things that helped you kind of not just learn product, but learn to like run a product organization? Because I know along the way you kind of really humble about your beginning there, figuring it out, but you've led some pretty impressive product teams along the way. Yeah, like what did you learn about like kind of overseeing product at sort of like the highest strategic level?
So I think that I wouldn't have been successful in the early days without a lot of operational frameworks.
Mhm.
So OKRs, metrics, like I kind of needed those boundaries in the early days. But, and I guess like I'll talk about some strategies that I've learned and maybe learned over time. So one is just really over communicating. So I think like part of it is managing the actual team, the organization, setting the roadmap and stuff. Part of it is huge part of it is how you manage your customers, how you manage
Yeah,
your stakeholders at the company. And
yeah,
if sales aren't good that quarter, it's eventually becomes product's fault. So yeah, if you're having churn, it's product's fault. I think proactive over communication is a really big one, especially if you work with like a founder CEO. That person gets really excited about a lot of ideas typically, and like they want to know that you have those, like you're tracking them, you're thinking about them, but also if it's not your first priority, where it stands on the priority list.
mhm,
Um, that I think was a big one for me. Another one is figuring out what kind of presentation style works for you. So,
mhm,
what I mean by this is I think there are two approaches. There are probably a lot more, but two approaches that I've tried. One is memorize everything, and one is just know what you're talking about.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I will never again try to give a presentation on something that I don't really know what I'm talking about because I can't memorize anything. Like I just don't have a very good memory of facts. The
yeah,
patterns and repeatability stylistically is great, but like memorizing words is awful. I mean, I've bombed a couple public, I don't know if everyone else would say I bombed, but like I felt like I bombed these kind of public presentations. Whereas later down the road, if I can just take myself a little bit less seriously, crack a joke here and there, and just really know the subject matter, that works really well. And a
yeah,
tip for anyone who, by the way, I don't think public speaking is at all necessary to be successful at this job, but
mhm,
was something I wanted to get better at.
mhm,
But something that a lot of people don't notice is like you see some of these people that are doing the rounds, doing the circuit. They do a lot of public speaking opportunities, and you're like, how do they do that? How do they memorize? And that must take so much time. If you look at that, actually, a lot of those people are talking about the same thing over and over again with a slightly different spin. So
oh yeah,
I also
definitely,
recommend for anyone that wants to do a little bit more public speaking, pick one topic and tweak it. Tweak it a
yeah,
little bit every time.
yeah, yeah, that's really good advice. I picked
Uh,
up on I would always listen to especially when I was at Atlassian, I would like listen to the executives, whether it was like earnings calls or, someone would be on a podcast or like give a presentation or something. I would kind of pick up on that, like, oh yeah, these people who are like kind of operating at the highest level, like they've got their kind of like go to anecdotes. They've got a couple go to points that they like to make or concepts that they like to illustrate. It's like, yeah, they kind of like, there's like some nuance and they can kind of mix it up or like add different stuff or whatever. But it's like they kind of have those things in their back pocket. And that was kind of a little trick that as well, where it's like you said, you don't have to
yeah,
memorize everything.
yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
But I'll give an unpopular,
Okay.
an unpopular management kind of practice. Not unpopular, but people just like to talk about differently.
Yeah.
Is I think that having a regular cadence of reviews is really important because
Mhm.
you don't want to micromanage people. You don't want to read a product requirement document, but there's kind of like a debate of, hey, like the utopian way of talking about things is, well, just like set a goal for each of the teams and let them do what it takes to hit that goal. The
Mhm.
reality is, like, you're gonna have different level of people on different teams. The reality is you have customer commitments that you sometimes really need to reach in order to hit revenue. And like, there's varying levels of room for mistakes. And I think like I think that that early PMs have to get critiques and have to get
Mhm.
feedback in order to grow. And the last thing you want is someone to work on something for like a quarter or two, ship it it's totally the wrong thing, and then like they get a bad performance review or they're not like viewed well by the company. So I think regular reviews, like what even though they're a little bit possibly dreadful
Yeah.
and like take work to prepare for, I think it's
Mhm.
like really necessary for running a product organization. So right now we do monthly. I think I'd like to probably do a little bit more frequently, but we do a monthly design review with every team. Of course, like the design, our head of design is doing that more frequently. The PMs are doing that more frequently. But I do a review once a month, and we get into detail because we want to know how it works, and that helps. It
Yeah.
also helps me. I mean, I want to be credible when I'm talking to our customers about the roadmap, and if I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on, like at a kind of detailed level, it's just bad for everybody.
Yeah. That's such good advice. It's interesting as you say that I realize that folks with a design background really have an aptitude for this. There's something in the culture of the design around reviews, feedback, critiques. I've always seen design teams like do a good job with that because it's so baked into like the craft, right? Like the act of like having critiques and feedback and sort of sparring sessions. And I can see how that kind of translating to, whether it's reviewing the roadmap or reviewing someone's performance on a regular basis, like there's good sort of lessons there around like the kind of like frequency and care that you pay to that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I love I do love the frequency of feedback point too, because I heard somewhere, I wish I knew the source or didn't butcher the quote, but basically the idea that like no one should go in from a manager's perspective, like you don't want to go in to performance reviews with your directs, like they shouldn't be surprised about anything. It shouldn't be like, hey, here's the annual performance review. And so there's nothing more frustrating, you know, um, as as an employee or someone reporting to this person, there's nothing more frustrating than like, hey, why am I hearing about this now for the first time? Like this has been going on for a year or even a quarter, and it's like, so like I always just like kind of took that to heart and like that sentiment where it's like the annual or quarterly or whatever you do kind of cadence around performance reviews make total sense, but it shouldn't be like the first time if there's an issue, good or bad, or like, compliments. That shouldn't be like the first time people are getting feedback. That's kind of the formal version of it, but it shouldn't be like, wow, I'm surprised. Like I haven't been doing a good job at this. And I'm just hearing about this now, 12 months on. Right.
Yeah. I have 2 thoughts on this. From a manager
Hmm.
point of view, something I've learned is that giving critical feedback about product, like, should be separate from giving the person feedback on how they work, like, 'cause the people
Right.
interpret it separately. So I've had,
Right.
in my early management career, people be like, "I had no idea that this was coming," and I was like, how not?" And so you have to
Hmm.
be pretty specific about, like, these things these things need to be improved in the product, but as a result or, like, as a cause, this is the root cause and it's something that needs to be worked on. But from an employee perspective, that is why over communicating is so important so that your manager knows what you did. So I see that people are like kind of sometimes shy in their self assessments and they don't promote their accomplishments. And when you have like a busy
Yeah.
manager or somebody that's like kind of at a senior level, they're not sitting there like as you do stuff like tracking your accomplishments. Sometimes the vocal people or the ones that self promote a lot, they just
Hmm.
get noticed more. Self promotion is very important for people, especially when
Hmm.
it comes to that time. And like that's kind of the at the time of a review, but I've never like maybe a couple managers of mine have asked for like a weekly report, but generally they don't. And I do one anyway because
Mm.
how else will they know what's going on? What you want, like you want to be proactive. One, you want them to know you're doing productive things.
Mm.
because that's just part of the job. But two, like you want to bring problems or maybe customers you're working with to their attention. So I just do a weekly update no matter whether I'm asked for it or not. Typically, people aren't going to ask for it. They're like, yeah, I trust you to do your job. But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there's a balance and some responsibility people needed for their own reputation and career advancement there.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. No, that makes perfect sense. Any other in terms of kind of like tactical tips or best practices that you would suggest?
Yeah, well, maybe I can just maybe I'll just, when I was earlier in my career, like getting comfortable with hiring people that maybe are a little bit that can be more senior than you. So I had this
For
misconception
sure.
because I worked in this really high performance environment for my first job. And that
Yeah.
I mean, our environment there was like, you need to become a director in 3 years. Like if you're not getting promoted all the time, not like you were out, but like in a lot of high performance cultures, it was like getting
Yeah.
promoted through the management track was very important.
For sure.
That
Yeah.
culture fortunately has changed where we see IC tracks of people who are able to become very senior individual contributors without having to manage people.
Mhm.
And a lot of people just they don't want to be executive. Like it is a lifestyle
Yeah.
that comes with sacrifices. And
Yeah.
not everybody wants those. So what I want to get comfortable with is I always thought oh, everybody, senior people that I hire, want my job and it's going to be very competitive. And that's really not the case. You never know what
Yeah.
people's motivations are for coming to work every day and what they want and how much time they want to put in. And that's something that I think getting experience as one of one and one of many is important. So one of one means when I worked in that
Mm.
job and I got to make those cool demos, I was the only designer and I was everybody really appreciated it, but it wasn't
Yeah.
exactly the best craftsperson. So then I worked on products that we sold. That was a different story. And I definitely gained some humility through that experience, but my craft got a lot better. And so I think working with other peers that do the same thing as you is also very important. Got to know
Mhm.
both sides.
Yeah.
The final thing
Yeah.
is uh, having conviction in what you believe so that you don't have to depend on data for everything. So I
Mm.
found in that first head of product job, I was kind of just insecure. Even though I knew it was the right things to do, I was kind of insecure. So I'd go and spend all this time getting data and very specific numbers to back up every decision I made. And when you do that, actually, you're going to never get to the right amount of data. You're never going to be able to attribute revenue and churn and user data to everything you do. I mean, it's
Mhm.
literally impossible. So
Yeah.
that almost made it less credible. What I learned over time is having more conviction in what it is I think I should do with maybe a data point. But
Mhm.
anecdotally, also having some of that knowledge has been pretty
Yeah.
helpful as well.
How do you make sure or how do you think about kind of like aligning that conviction with, because it's not just about like what you believe to be true, but like getting like other parts and other folks around you or leadership or whatever to kind of like buy into that point of view and be like, yeah, okay, like we're not gonna like, you know, chase down like every shred of evidence about this thing because we just know like kind of like if we do these things, it's like the score takes care of itself kind of thinking with some of our actions. So like, yeah, how do you think about like just like getting the other right people kind of lined up with you on that?
I think in a tactical example would be where maybe you might try to give an exact revenue number to some features and stack rank them.
Right.
Now I would say, you know what? Okay, we have these 3 different areas. Maybe one's just on increasing active usage. We don't care about revenue there, but some we have these features that really important for new business or
Mhm.
retention.
Yeah.
What I would do is I would point to 3 customers that I'd say the customer A, B, and C are saying that this is extremely important to them and they're probably not going to buy the product because of it. There's
Yeah.
just like a
Yeah.
much lower time investment in doing that. Like, so know your
Yeah.
CRM, have be friends with some salespeople, and like we have to do a top 5 exercise every quarter where we get a representative from commercial sales, enterprise sales, CS, support, and marketing to give us their top 5. Like
Mhm.
they go deal with the ranking themselves, and then they come to us product and tell us like what's the top 5. I refer to that all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's generally it's very credible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But that's really good advice, and like, there's a lot of talk around storytelling, and I sort of like as a kind of, you know, product marketer myself and kind of former writer, like storytelling is something I kind of pay a lot of attention to. It's something that companies are so keen on, like being a good storyteller internally, externally, blah blah blah. One of the real kind of tenets of story, even if you just sort of study it from a psychological perspective, is like people are attracted to like people connect with individual characters, not like, pools of data, right? Like you could tell someone all the facts, take some sort of like tragedy or, calamity that's happened in the world. Like you could hit people with all the facts and figures and, data around the scope of a tragedy. And we kind of process it, like, okay, like I know that's sad or I know that's terrible or whatever, but it doesn't hit emotionally. But like you tell a story of like one person who lived through that hardship and like make you connect with one character, and you could have like a crying your eyes out emotional moment where it's like, oh my god, I can't believe this happened to this one person. And it could be like a fictional person, right? But it's this idea that like humans, if you want to like do all this storytelling that we all claim to care so much about, it's not always about, the average X%, like telling stories with this like data point of view, but it's like connect it to a character or an individual. And what you said is a great example of that, where it's like this customer over here, they're doing this right now. And they said, if we don't have this feature, they're going to go with a competitor. Like for an executive, it's like, sure, that's anecdotal, but it's like
Yeah.
it's a very emotional moment to be like, oh, okay, like I can kind of ground myself psychologically in this. Right. So that's an interesting perspective. It's super valuable.
We have Robin is a workplace experience. We have these kiosks and status boards that are interactive that our customers can put up on site.
Oh,
And I
nice.
went to visit a customer, and our our buttons were really high, or they were
Mhm.
kind of high. They were too
Yeah.
high. And what they
Yeah.
showed us is like we have people with accessibility challenges that can't use this, so we can't even implement your interactive one because they can't reach the button. And that was like an emotional moment for me. I was like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
we have to fix this.
Wow. Yeah. 100%. And imagine, I could imagine some version of a PM coming to you with like, you have all the facts and figures and data in the world around like, hey, the average height of, humans in this demographic, adjusting for footwear velocity and arm length and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you could put together a whole data package on that. But let's go ahead and have that one moment where you're like, hey, this is like one person, they can't reach this. Like they're, like just sort of seeing that and connects so much stronger with you. And the real 1-2 punches kind of
Yeah.
put the two together too, I think.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to do a round 2 with this because I think there's plenty more we could talk about, and I could talk about this kind of stuff all day. First off is what's something that's been kind of top of mind for you lately, or, something that you're kind of either wrestling with, figuring out, yeah, something top of mind for you lately.
Yeah. So I had a realization about imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
So now I've been in this leadership roles for like 10 years. So I don't think I really feel internally the imposter syndrome, but I think that a lot of people think of it as like, I feel like I personally internally feel like inadequate, and that's uncomfortable for me. But I've been thinking
Mhm.
a lot about the result of it. And I actually think the result of it is that somebody who like doesn't necessarily feel like they belong in a leadership position is not aware of the impact of the things that they say and do within the organization and the level of influence that they have. That was my biggest realization is like, I've gotten feedback that, hey, you said this thing and then we made a decision based off it. It was totally unintentional. Or maybe I'd given somebody like critical feedback that didn't know me very well and like thought that there would be some consequence. Or like when I
Mhm.
started this new job, we did like our first kind of reviews and I gave a lot of feedback and people like didn't want to do them anymore. They're like,
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
feels like a pairing squad. And I was like, oh, what? I go into this thinking like, I'm just one of you. I'm here to help. It is not true. It does really
Yeah.
not. I think that people in leadership positions, like imposter syndrome is about you, but it's not about you. It's about the people around you. So you got to really understand that if you have some kind of like VP or C level title, people are going to
Mhm.
perceive you as that because that's your job and that's your role, whether
Yeah.
you feel comfortable in it or not. So if you want to be
Mhm.
successful in that role, you have to know the impact of the things that you're doing. As like the I don't know, somewhere it clicked for me. I was like, yeah, I've definitely have been in situations where I thought I still think of myself as like the new person, and the reality is that that's just not true.
Yeah. That's great advice. I've realized this in a big way. And it's not exactly what you're saying, but kind of related. If you're ever so I'm doing a lot of these interviews right now, for example, so I end up like kind of like watching myself, hearing myself on recordings, or if you're someone who like listens to meetings back, or we talked about public speaking. If you give a presentation and like watch yourself, anyone ever has a chance to like listen to themselves on an audio and video recording, you will realize like, oh, I'm coming off in a lot of moments. You're like gonna realize like I'm coming off in a way that I really didn't intend. And I seem like this, but really I'm just like maybe I'm thinking about something and I seem like that, but I don't really mean to be acting this way, or like I could see how someone would be perceived. And I've really realized that. And it's helped me sort of like understand other people in a lot of ways too, where it's like, maybe if someone seems annoyed, like they could not be at all, or if they seem confused, like maybe they're not, or if they seem sort of flip about a certain thing, like maybe they're not, because often like you know, we're not presenting and expressing ourselves the way we think we are, and just giving other people the benefit of the doubt around that, I think is super important too. But yeah, I mean the whole
So
imposter
hard to
syndrome
watch and
thing.
look into yourself.
It's brutal. I tell you, it's brutal, but
Yeah.
it's super helpful, especially like, people do the sound of your own voice thing. And it's like, I can say like, you get over that. Like it just takes a lot of, it takes a lot of repetition and it's not fun. Cool,
Yep.
cool. We've got, I like to ask product people about products. Product people are passionate about products. What's something you've been, trying out or excited about lately? This could be, just on the personal side, could be something for work, whatever.
Yeah. So I always like I often get stumped when people ask me this question because I'm like, I don't, geek out really on other like tech software, but
Yeah.
products are just like things you use. Okay. So
Hmm.
I'll tell you about a couple products that I'm
For sure.
pretty impressed with these days. So one is I just got this Hatch sleep machine and it's like a mobile controlled, it has like these sounds and lights and like there's definitely science behind it of understanding what helps people with sleep. But I love that it's really easy to set up. And it's beautiful. But what I saw is like when I was buying it, I think I saw somewhere on the site, maybe I did a search for it and it was like and the search result came up was Hatch baby. And I was like, what's Hatch baby?
Yeah.
I'm not a baby. Like I don't need a baby
Yeah.
product.
Right.
And it looks like the company started for babies and discovered that like adults would benefit from it too. And they pivoted. So like as a product person, I love that sort of like realization that there was a market and that they came to, and now I
Yeah.
benefit from it. So
That's so cool.
love that one.
Yeah, that's so funny. We've got the hatch for our toddler, and it's like it's awesome. It's been like in his room like his whole life now, and it's like I didn't know they made an adult version of it, but it makes total sense. And it's like, yeah, like I love the sort of strategy of like how simple and elegant it is to sort of just like apply the same kind of similar product in a different context like that and find success. This is like really cool.
Yeah. All right. The next one is Liquid Death. I just love the brand, but it's cool
Mhm.
design. So this Liquid Death water, sparkling water, etc. They'll tell you like it's very practical. So I love the design, but it also is very practical. So I can take this
Yeah.
can. Oh, and it's sustainable, more
Mhm.
sustainable than I can take it to the gym, so I can use it in Soul Cycle, which I definitely appreciate. So I don't have to like buy their $5 or $6 boxed water when I'm there. But
Mhm.
I also really like that there's kind of a movement towards non-alcoholic drinks you can have at a party or an event so that people can kind of choose. And like Liquid Death is one of those things that you can still look cool carrying a party. So I feel like it's sort of more, it's like democratization of beverages.
Yeah.
So love
That's
that
a
brand. They also have
that's a
great
great
merch.
one. That's a great also example of just like kind of, taking an existing thing, like arguably like the most important existing thing, water, and like layering on like really cool branding, new packaging, like getting people like excited about it. The company's done incredible. I've seen some stuff like,
Mhm.
like 100+ million in revenue, like 2 or 3 years after starting. It's just like insane how popular that's become. So how quickly yeah, it's like a master class in so many things with product and brand.
This is also an entrepreneurial thing, which is most people are going to get shot down. Who in their right mind gets into the water business, right? Like
Right.
any I mean, I don't know what their VC background is, but if
I
they
think
went out for
yeah,
traditional VC funding in like 2018, yeah, I can guess what they're been. And so like
yeah,
if you believe in it and you like build following in your own way, like sometimes you do that. And yeah,
yeah,
it's a commodity. Water is a commodity, but it has a special experience around it, and I do believe that the experience can be the product or the brand can be the product, so it's a perfect
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
the final example I have, I just started, like had a bunch of clothes and, I had heard about The Real, which is, like, where you can
Mhm,
resell luxury clothes and they do all the work for you. So,
mhm.
like, the concept is cool, but I actually went to their physical location and I was shocked. It was like this almost like huge department store, but they had all these couches you can sit, they had all these people you could and they had like a coffee bar there. I was just totally surprised. I thought
Yes.
it was just this kind of like online business or so the physical experience is what impressed me most. Now we'll see how much money I get back for these clothes. There's process. But no,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
pretty happy about at least the physical experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've heard about this company too. I'll take a closer look, but like another great example of taking something that's like maybe not a commodity, but like think of the perception and experience around like secondhand clothes. Like it doesn't feel like a high-end branded experience. And like I'm looking at their site right now and it feels like, what you would get from like a kind of high fashion brand or like like a premium luxury sort of and they've sort of layered that onto something that otherwise would have been definitely not treated that way. So yeah, that's really cool. That's a great example.
Yeah.
Cool. This has been super fun. If folks want to say hi, learn more, get in touch, anything like that, what's maybe a way they could do that?
LinkedIn, Ciara Peter is probably the best way to get in touch. Feel free to send a message or
Cool, cool.
connect.
All right. We'll be sure to drop your LinkedIn link in the show notes. So if folks want to say hi, they can find you there. Otherwise, this was super fun today. Thanks for so much for coming on the show today. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.